Hello everyone, I'm going to be talking about the implements available to the Thaumaturge before level 7 in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. I will not be focusing on weapons above level 7 because generally my goal is to get to level 5 with these class descriptions. However, if this video gets more than 20 likes, I will try to create a video on implements above level 7 where they get their second ability. Okay, so I'm basically just going to list through each of these and what types of things they are useful for. So the amulet gives the ability Amulet's Abeyance, which is a reaction triggered by the target of your exploit vulnerability, damaging you or an ally within 15 feet. The effect is you basically brandish it and gain resistance equal to 2 plus your level versus the attack. So if you're level 1, you gain 3 resistance to the attack. If you're level 2, 4, so on and so forth. This is maintained at all levels and scales with it. It's useful to prevent an enemy from dealing damage which could make someone go down, but since it is infinite use, there's no reason to not just use it after pretty much every attack. The bell. So the way the bell works is it triggers versus either a caster or a weapon attack made against you or your ally. The target must be the target of your exploit vulnerability, and it forces a fortitude save versus casters and a will save versus the weapon attack. And then you impose a condition versus the target. With the caster, it's always the stupefied condition, which then affects the DC of your save. For the weapon attack, it imposes Enfeebled or Clumsy. Enfeebled is better against melee attacks because it affects strength-based checks, whereas Clumsy is useful against ranged attacks because it imposes a dependency on dex attacks. I do not believe it modifies the attack which triggered this ability, but it does affect future abilities. The Chalice. The way this works is it's essentially a healing item. So you have 2 actions, although it's technically grouped into 1 action, it just made more sense to split them into the 2 different uses for me. So the sip action is completely infinite use. It targets yourself or an ally if you're administering it to that ally. So you actually have to bring the chalice up to them and pour it in their mouth. It gives 2 plus half of your level temporary hit points. The half level is rounded up. So if you're level 1, that means that you heal 3 hit points. If you're level 2, it means you heal 1. If you're level 3, you heal 2, etc. And this temporary hit points last until the end of your next turn or until they are taken away by an attack. It is, again, infinite use. There's no restrictions. The second choice is Drain. It's administered the same way and heals 3 times your level hit points. So at level 1, that's 3, level 2, 6, etc. However, it can only be used once every 10 minutes, and it only refills if no one uses the sip ability. So if there's 10 minutes with no one sipping from it, then you can use it again. This is essentially similar to the Treat Wounds ability, in that it can give healing every 10 minutes. However, since it can also be used in combat, it can be a good save someone from dying type ability. The Lantern. This is a mostly non-combat implement. The way it works is with a free action, you can light it. It counteracts magical darkness, which has a DC equal to half your level. So at level 1 again, 1, etc. So you can see through magical darkness if it is not cast by a higher level caster than you are. Then it gives you and your allies a +1 to perception checks and recall knowledge checks versus any creatures within the lantern light. So anything within the light, you apply this bonus to. And the light stretches 20 feet of bright light, which is the range of that bonus, and then you gain an additional 20 feet of dim light, which is not given that bonus. Additionally, the GM also rolls a free secret check for any hazard or secret within the range's lantern light. So if you walk by a hidden door, you do not have to be searching for the GM to roll a free check to see if you see the door. The Mirror is an interesting one in that it essentially casts an illusion spell without using magic. The way it works is you have the Mirror's Reflection action. It takes 1 action, and you create an illusionary double of yourself in a space within 15 feet of you. This can allow you to flank with the second double. You can attack or cast abilities from either position, and the ability ends whenever one of the two moves, at which point the one that moved becomes where you actually were. This does not have the disadvantage of AoE attacks happening on both. It only applies once. However, enemies can target either one. So if you have one closer to free enemies and one closer to free other enemies, then you could be attacked 6 times in a turn. So you have to be a little careful about where you place the double, since it ends whenever you move. It's just a couple of things to be aware of before you just toss it down every chance you get. It's not a mirror image, which reduces the amount of damage you take. If anything, it could increase it. However, it can also flank and such, so make your choice. Regalia is another mostly non-combat. The way it works is it gives you a +1 circumstance bonus to deception, diplomacy, and intimidation. Additionally, allies can follow the expert, meaning that it's essentially giving one roll rather than everyone rolling separately, to follow you with a +1 bonus to their roll as long as you are trained in the skill. Usually you have to be expert to be able to be the expert to be followed. This lets you cheat that because of self-confidence, essentially. Then, the way it works is it gives a 15 feet emanation in combat, which gives a +1 versus fear effects to your allies. You also always reduce any frightened conditions you are affected by 1 at the end of your turn, which can be useful whenever you're dealing with, say, a dragon or another creature imposing fear. The tome is a general use one that gives you a +1 to all recall knowledge checks you make. It's a circumstance bonus. Additionally, it lets you become trained in 2 skills each daily preparation. As quoted here, at 3rd level, you become an expert in one of the 2, and at 5th level, you're an expert in both skills. So essentially, it just gives you a little more versatility on top of the versatility you already have. Okay, so the wand is similar to, if you played 5th edition, it's similar to the Eldritch Blast of the Warlock, however it deals less damage. It deals cold, electricity, or fire damage, and it forces the enemy to make a reflex save. If the enemy fails, you deal 1d4 plus charisma damage of whatever type you selected. Once every 4 rounds, you can overcharge and deal 1d6 plus charisma damage instead, but then you have to recharge, and you can still use the other ability to deal damage. But if you make a critical hit with one of your strikes rather than just using the wand, then you automatically recharge your wand's overcharge ability. The last option is the weapon. This is possibly the most straightforward one. Essentially, whenever the target of your exploit vulnerability is within your melee range, so that's usually 5 feet, then every time it attempts to use an action with the concentrate, manipulate, or move trait, that's almost all of them, then you get to make a strike with no multi-effect penalty. It does not apply to your next turn, it does not apply prior turns. It's a reaction off your turn. If you critically hit the enemy, then you get to disrupt their action. Additionally, at 5th level, you gain the weapon specialization effect of the weapon you're holding. One thing to note here is you can always swap out what item your implement is within the parameters. Like, you have to attune to a wand if you have a wand, you have to attune to a weapon if you have a weapon, but you can take 1 day to change it in between various missions. So if one mission you want a ranged weapon, you can have a ranged weapon, but then if the next mission you want a melee weapon, you can swap that. So this essentially gives you a lot of versatility in between missions, but less within it. I hope this was helpful in explaining the options for implements in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. If you have any additional questions or comments about this, feel free to ask. Thank you for watching.